The lobby of Meridian Tower went quiet when Vanessa Whitmore stopped in front of the maintenance man sitting on the stairs. She never looked at him. She spoke to her HR director instead, the way a woman points out a scuff on the floor. Let him go. Today. And in the future, staff of this kind use the back entrance. Raymond Hale stood up. He peeled off his work gloves, folded them once, and set them on his cart. He straightened his 10-year-old daughter's crooked braid. Then he smiled, and it was almost kind. "Before you celebrate," he said, "you might want to check who actually owns this building." At 5 in the morning, the apartment was still dark, and Raymond Hale was losing a fight with a hair tie. Nora sat on the kitchen chair in front of him with her back straight the way her mother used to sit. She had learned not to complain when her father's fingers, which had spent 20 years handling steel and rebar, tried to manage something as small as a braid. He worked slowly. He got it wrong twice. He started over both times. "Dad," she said, "you're making the left one fatter again." "I know. Mom did it even." "Your mother did a lot of things even," Raymond said. "Hold still." Above the kitchen table hung the only thing on the walls worth looking at. It was an architectural rendering framed in cheap black plastic of a tower with a curved glass face that caught light like water. In the bottom corner, in a small, precise hand, was the signature A. Hale. Nora had looked at that drawing her whole life. This morning she asked about it as if for the first time. "Is that the building where you mop the floors?" Raymond's hands went still for the length of a breath. Then he kept going. "Your mother drew it," he said. "I built it. Now I take care of it." He did not say the rest because the rest was not a thing you handed a 10-year-old with her cereal. Amara Hale had spent 4 years of her life on that tower and 11 months dying of pancreatic cancer, and the hospital bills that came afterward had eaten the construction company, the house, the trucks, and every account with his name on it. When the last of it was gone, one thing was still standing on Bellamy Street with her signature on the plans, and Raymond Hale had decided he would sooner be buried than let a bank take it. He finished the braid. It was uneven. Nora looked at herself in the black screen of the microwave and declared it acceptable. "There's a light out on the 12th floor," Raymond said, packing her lunch. "Been out 3 weeks. I've replaced the bulb twice the ballast once, and it still flickers and dies. So it's broken." "Nothing's broken," he said. "It just hasn't been figured out yet." He drove her to school in a truck that was 15 years old and turned onto Bellamy Street at 7, where the tower his wife had drawn came up out of the morning like something rising to meet him. Meridian Tower had a lobby of pale marble and 30-foot ceilings, and by 7:15 every morning it had Walter Boyd standing at the security desk in a uniform. He pressed himself. Walter was 63. He had run security on the construction site back when the tower was a hole in the ground, and Amara Hale walked the mud in a hard hat, arguing with contractors about the angle of the glass. He was the only person in the building who knew exactly who the maintenance technician was. He had known from the first day when Raymond walked through the service entrance in a Brightline Facility Services jacket and looked at him with a request in his eyes that he never had to say out loud. Walter had never said a word. That was between them. "Morning," Walter said. "Morning," Raymond answered and went to work. The corporation that leased Meridian Tower employed 340 people, and Raymond Hale knew a surprising number of them by name. He knew Casey Doyle at the reception desk was 7 months pregnant and had started taking the stairs to the 2nd floor because standing up from her chair too fast made her dizzy. He knew the young man in the IT closet on 8 ate instant noodles at his desk on Thursdays, because Thursday was the day before payday. He knew which executives said thank you to the cleaning crew and which ones walked through them like weather. That was in the end the reason he was there. That and the fact that a maintenance shift ended at 3:30, which meant a man could be standing at a school gate by 3:45 without asking anyone's permission. The building's lease was up on the 22nd. 10 years, an enormous sum of money, and a signature that would tie his wife's tower to this company until Nora was a grown woman. Raymond had told his lawyer he wanted to see the tenant first, not the financials, not the credit rating, the tenant. So he had taken a job through the subcontractor, and for 11 months he had pushed a cart through his own hallways, watching how a company treated the people it could afford to ignore. He had not decided yet. On the 40th floor, in a room with a table that cost more than the truck in the parking garage, Vanessa Whitmore was presenting her numbers to the board. She was 34, and she had been chief executive for 6 months, and she knew exactly what every person at that table thought of her. Her father sat at the head of it. Gerald Whitmore had been chairman for 19 years, and he interrupted her in the middle of a sentence about operating margins. "Costs are still running 11% above sector," he said to the room rather than to her. "In 6 months, I need a number, not an explanation." 2 seats down, a board member leaned toward his neighbor and said something at a volume that was not quite a whisper. Vanessa heard it the way you hear your own name in a crowded room. Her chair had been reserved before she ever earned it. She finished the presentation. Her voice did not shake because she had trained it not to the way other people train a dog. Afterward, she walked back to her office, shut the door, and stood with her hands flat on the desk until her breathing evened out. Then she did the thing she did on the bad days, which she would have denied under oath. She opened the bottom drawer. There was a photograph in it curled at the edges of a woman in a gray uniform standing in the service corridor of an office building with a rolling bucket beside her. The woman was not smiling. She had just worked 11 hours and had 3 more to go. Vanessa looked at the picture for about 4 seconds. Then she shut the drawer hard enough to rattle the pen cup and went back to work and did not think about it again for 3 weeks, which was, as it turned out, exactly how long she had. 3 weeks earlier, Diane Okafor had come into that same office with a stack of folders and a bad feeling. Diane ran human resources, and she had spent a decade learning the difference between a company that cut costs and a company that cut people. She laid the folders down and worked through them one at a time, while Vanessa signed and initialed and moved on, and near the bottom of the stack was a single page that Diane had flagged twice. It concerned the building. The lease on Meridian Tower ran out in less than 2 months, and the renewal, 10 years a figure with a great many zeros in it, required executive approval no later than 30 days before expiration. After that window, the agreement lapsed automatically, and the landlord was under no obligation to offer anything at all. Vanessa read the number, not the page. The number was ugly. It sat in the operating column like a stain, and in 6 weeks she had to stand in front of her father and show him a clean quarter. She drew a line through it in red pen and wrote 3 words in the margin: defer. Renegotiate next quarter. Diane opened her mouth. "Ma'am, the language on this one is..." Vanessa had already turned the page. That Tuesday afternoon in the lobby, Raymond Hale carried a 60-pound circulation pump up 2 flights of service stairs because the freight elevator had been down since Friday, and when he reached the top, he sat on the 3rd step of the lobby stairs to get his breath. It was 3:15. Nora sat beside him with her backpack and a coloring book, waiting for his shift to end the way she did most days. Vanessa came through the lobby with 4 men in expensive coats, investors in for a walkthrough, and she stopped. She did not raise her voice. She did not use a slur. What she did was worse, and Walter Boyd, watching from the security desk, understood it immediately. She talked about the man on the stairs as though he were not sitting 8 feet away with his lungs still burning. "Diane," she said, "is this what I'm supposed to see in my main lobby?" Diane, half a step behind her, said nothing. "We pay for a brand image," Vanessa went on. "We don't pay for this." Nora looked up from her coloring book. "He's just resting for a minute," she said. Vanessa did not look at the child either. She kept her eyes on her HR director, and there was something almost tired in her voice, as if she were pointing out a scuff on the floor. "And children," she said, "is this an office or a daycare?" She started walking again and delivered the rest over her shoulder. "Let him go. Today. And in the future, staff of this kind use the back entrance." Staff of this kind. 4 words. There was not a single ugly one among them, and every person in that lobby knew exactly what they meant. Diane's hands were not steady when she brought the paper over. She could not look at him. "Mr. Hale," she said, "you'll need to sign this." Raymond signed it. He stood up. He took off his work gloves, folded them once, and set them on the cart. At the security desk, Walter Boyd came out from behind the counter and got exactly one step before Raymond looked at him and gave the smallest shake of his head. "Don't." Walter stopped. Raymond crouched down and straightened the ribbon at the end of his daughter's crooked braid, which had come loose the way it always did by the afternoon. He took his time about it. Then he stood and looked at the woman who had not once looked at him and said the words that would be on the internet within the hour. "Before you celebrate, you might want to check who actually owns this building." He picked up Nora's backpack. He took her hand. And then in front of 300 people and 4 investors and a chief executive who had just told him to use the back entrance, Raymond Hale walked out through the front doors of his wife's building. On the steps outside, Nora tugged his hand. "Are you mad at her?" she asked. Raymond considered the question longer than she expected. "I feel sorry for her," he said. "People only look down on someone when they're afraid of turning into them." The doors swung shut behind him, and in that moment, 300 people who had all heard the same sentence heard 300 different things. The investors heard a threat and began doing arithmetic about legal exposure. Vanessa heard insolence, a man from the bottom of the building who had dared to lift his chin. Diane Okafor heard an accusation, and it was addressed to her because she was the one holding the pen. And Walter Boyd, alone at his desk, heard the only thing Raymond had actually said. He heard a father teaching his daughter something in a room that just happened to be listening. Walter heard it correctly because he was the one man in that lobby who had ever stopped and asked Raymond Hale his name. Because that was the strange thing about the sentence. Raymond had not been claiming power. A deed in a safe deposit box is not what makes a man stand up straight any more than a muddy work jacket is what makes him kneel. He was showing a 10-year-old girl where a person's worth actually lives, and it does not live in what other people are willing to see. The lesson: if there is one is quieter than the moment deserved when you look at another person with contempt, the thing that shrinks is not them. They are still standing exactly where they were. It is your own field of vision that just got smaller. The video was 40 seconds long and had been shot on a phone from behind a marble column. By 9 that night, it had been viewed 2 million times. It did not show Vanessa Whitmore's face clearly. It did not need to. It showed a man folding his gloves, a little girl with a crooked braid, and a sentence that people repeated to each other all evening like a line from a song. Check who actually owns this building. Marcus Kane, who ran the corporation's legal department and had never in his life been in a hurry, pulled the county property records at 9:40. The deed to Meridian Tower was not held by a person. It was held by something called the Hale Legacy Trust, and the only human name on any of the filings belonged to the trustee, an attorney named Elliot Vance. Kane brought it to Vanessa's office and set the printout on her desk like a man laying down a card. "There's no Raymond Hale anywhere on this," he said. "The trustee is a lawyer. Whoever he is, he's a janitor with a good story." Diane Okafor was standing by the window, and she had gone the color of the paper. "Vance," she said. Both of them looked at her. Elliot Vance was Amara Hale's attorney. Diane's voice came out strange and flat. "Amara Hale designed this building. Her name is on the plaque in the lobby. It's been on the plaque in the lobby for 11 years. She made herself finish it. Her husband's name was Raymond. Nobody said anything for a while. Vanessa turned to her computer and opened the approval log, and she already knew what she was going to find the way you know a stair is missing before your foot goes through it. 3 weeks ago, a lease renewal, 10 years. 30 days notice required, and after that, the agreement lapsed on its own without argument, without a hearing, without anyone needing to do anything at all. And there in the margin in her own handwriting, in red deffer, renegotiate next quarter. She counted the days twice because the first count seemed like a mistake. The lease on Meridian Tower expired in 48 hours. There was no bad luck in it. There was no coincidence, no trap, no clever man waiting in the dark with a plan. There was only a woman who had looked at a number instead of a page because the number was ugly and her father was counting. Down on the ground floor, the building had already begun to talk. Casey Doyle at reception had watched the whole thing from 12 feet away and had told 4 people by the elevator that the janitor knew her by name and had once carried a box of files up to 2 so she would not have to. The cleaning crew watched the clip in the service corridor on somebody's phone over and over, and nobody said anything, and everybody understood. By midnight, the corporation's own employees were arguing about it in the comments under a video of their own lobby. The board met at 11 that night, and Vanessa walked into the room expecting to be torn apart. Her father did not tear her apart. That was the first thing that frightened her. Gerald Whitmore sat at the head of the table with his hands folded and let Marcus Kane do the talking, and Kane talked the way he always did, quietly, reasonably, as though he were reading a weather report. Raymond Hale had filed for personal bankruptcy 4 years ago. He had gone under owing something in the neighborhood of $1.4 million, almost all of it medical. And 11 days before he filed, he had moved a single asset, the tower, into a trust. 11 days, Kane repeated and let it sit there. That's called a fraudulent transfer, he went on. It's arguable. I'm not saying we win it. I'm saying we file it, and we ask a judge to freeze the trust's ability to execute any lease decision until it's resolved, and that takes 18 months minimum. In the meantime, the current terms hold over, and we sit right where we are paying rent to a frozen account. Vanessa said that the man had been paying his wife's cancer bills. Kane agreed that he had. He said it the way a surgeon agrees that an incision will bleed. Then he explained patiently that a judge would not be asked to decide whether Raymond Hale was sympathetic. A judge would be asked to decide whether the timing looked deliberate, and 11 days looked deliberate to anyone, and that was all the leverage a company needed. We are not trying to take his building, Kane said. We are trying to make holding on to it more expensive than letting us stay in it. One of the directors asked whether the man would fight it. With what? Kane said. He's on a maintenance wage through a subcontractor. He rents. He has no company anymore. He has a bankruptcy on his record. Then in the same unremarkable voice he added, and he's raising a 10-year-old girl on his own. Vanessa lifted her head. He'll want to be careful, Kane said, about how much of his life he lets a court look at. Housing situation, income stability, financial history. Any competent opposing counsel raises questions about the suitability of a child's environment. I wouldn't have to raise them. I'd just have to let him imagine that somebody might. There was a silence in the room that no one seemed to find remarkable, except her. Vanessa Whitmore had spent 6 months being ruthless, because ruthlessness was the price of her chair, and she had thought in some private compartment that she understood the world she was climbing. She understood it now. It was a room where a man in a good suit could threaten to take a child from her father and call it litigation strategy, and 11 other people could sit there and think about their shares. Gerald Whitmore looked at his daughter for the first time all night. "Do you want to keep your job?" he said. "Then sign it." The next morning, Diane Okafor put her resignation on Vanessa's desk at 8 o'clock in a plain envelope, and she stood there while it was read. "I signed a termination for a man who was sitting down because he had just carried a pump up 2 flights of stairs," Diane said. "I handed it to him in front of his kid. I've been in this business 11 years, and I have never done anything I was ashamed of until Tuesday." She nodded at the envelope. "I don't have another one of those in me." Vanessa told her that resignations during a legal matter looked bad and heard how small it sounded even as she said it. Diane picked up her bag. "You keep saying we," she answered from the doorway. "There isn't a we. There's you and there's the rest of us wondering which one of us is next." An hour later, a courier reached Raymond Hale's apartment with a letter on very good paper. It was polite. It referred to the trust's asset transfer as a matter warranting review. It attached copies of his bankruptcy filings, which was not necessary, and copies of the hospital's collection notices, which was not necessary either, and which he had not seen in 4 years and had never wanted to see again. Somewhere in the fourth paragraph, there was a phrase about ensuring a stable and appropriate environment for any minor dependents affected by protracted proceedings. Raymond read it twice at the kitchen table under his wife's drawing. Then he called Elliot Vance, and Vance came over, and the two of them sat with the letter between them, while Nora did her homework at the other end of the same table 6 feet away, kicking one foot against the chair leg. "You win this," Vance said, keeping his voice down. "In the end, you win. The transfer was legitimate, and I can prove it in my sleep." He turned the letter face down. "But they will make it take 3 years, Ray. And for 3 years, you will be a man in a courtroom explaining why his daughter lives in a rented apartment. For 3 years, she is going to hear people say her father is a fraud." Then he laid out the 2 roads because that was his job. The first was simple. Do nothing. Let the lease die tomorrow at midnight. On Friday morning, 340 employees would walk up the front steps and find the doors locked. The stock would crater by 10 o'clock, and the board that had just made a quiet threat about a child would be finished by the weekend, along with the chief executive who had told him to use the back entrance. It would be perfect. It would be legal. It would cost him nothing. The second was to sign the renewal, which meant putting his name and his wife's building at the service of the same men who had written that 4th paragraph and calling it peace. Vance left without an answer. Raymond sat for a long time and watched Nora work a subtraction problem with her tongue between her teeth. She had one braid coming loose already. He thought about the sentence he had said to her on the steps and how easy it had been to say when it had cost him nothing at all. At some point, he got up and stood in front of his wife's drawing, and he allowed himself for about 10 minutes to imagine the first road. He could see it very clearly. The locked doors, the cameras on the sidewalk, Gerald Whitmore in front of a microphone he could not control, Marcus Kane carrying a box out to his car, a young woman in an expensive coat standing in an empty lobby with nothing left to run, and Amara, who had spent 4 years fighting men in suits over the angle of a piece of glass, would have hated every second of it. Not because those men deserved better. Because of the woman at the reception desk who was 7 months pregnant and had 11 weeks of income between her and a problem. Because of the kid in the IT closet eating instant noodles the day before payday. Because the people who get buried when a building closes are never the people who signed the letter. Raymond turned around and looked at his daughter doing her subtraction, and he thought, she is going to ask me about this someday. 7 directors from the middle floors signed a single letter that afternoon. It was not a threat. It was worse than a threat. It was a list of names of people who did not want to be associated with what was about to be filed in court. They did not ask for the chief executive's resignation. They simply wrote in one flat paragraph that they would not participate in any proceeding involving the custody or the living situation of an employee's child, and they attached their titles, and their titles were the entire operating spine of the company. And Marcus Kane, working through the security logs, called Walter Boyd up to the 40th floor and asked him in his reasonable way how long he had known who the maintenance technician really was. Walter stood with his hands behind his back the way he had stood for 40 years. "The whole time," he said. Kane asked him why he had never told anyone. "Because he asked me not to." Walter looked around the room at the glass at the long table. "And because nobody ever asked me anything." He was almost at the door when he stopped and said the last of it not to Kane but to Vanessa, who was standing by the window and had not said a word during any of it. "I knew who he was because I looked at him," Walter said. "You didn't." Vanessa drove to Raymond Hale's apartment that evening with a signed renewal agreement in her bag and a check with the amount left blank. She did that because buying things was the only language she had ever been fluent in. She sat in the car for 4 minutes before she got out. She had rehearsed it on the drive. She would not apologize because an apology was an admission, and an admission was a document, and Kane had told her that anything she said to the man could end up in a filing. She would call it a commercial resolution. She would be gracious. She would leave with a signature and her career, and in a year nobody would remember the video. That was the plan. She carried up the stairwell, and it lasted about 90 seconds. The apartment was on the 2nd floor of a building with an outside staircase. Raymond was sitting on the top step in the last of the light, and Nora sat one step below him between his knees, and he was braiding her hair for the second time that day because it had come loose again. He looked up. He did not tell her to leave. He also did not stop what he was doing. Vanessa stood at the bottom of the stairs and heard herself talk. She heard the words come out in the shape she used in boardrooms, the numbers first, the concession, second the leverage kept quiet at the back where it could be reached for. She offered a rent increase. She offered a settlement for the wrongful termination. She said the figure could be whatever he wanted it to be. She climbed 3 steps and set the blank check down on the wood. Raymond looked at it the way a man looks at a leaf that has landed near his foot. He kept braiding. And Nora turned her head and looked at Vanessa with the frank, unhurried attention that only children are still capable of. "You're the lady who told my dad to use the back door," she said. Vanessa's mouth opened and nothing came out of it. "My dad stays late a lot." Nora went on in a perfectly friendly voice as if she were explaining something helpful. "He's been trying to fix the light in the hallway on the 12th floor for 3 weeks. He can't figure out what's wrong with it." She tipped her head to one side. "He says you work late and a dark hallway is scary when you're by yourself." Then the girl asked her question, and it went through Vanessa Whitmore like something thrown. "Are you scared of him?" Nora said. "He never did anything to you." Raymond's hands went on with the braid. He did not look up, and he did not answer for his daughter, and the silence that followed belonged entirely to the woman standing on the stairs. Vanessa took the check back. She said she was sorry to have bothered them. She made it 4 blocks before she had to pull over because she could not see the road anymore. She went back to the tower because she did not have anywhere else. The lobby was empty at 11 at night, the marble black and shining, and she rode up to the 40th floor and sat in her office without turning on the lights. After a while, she opened the bottom drawer. She had carried that photograph from desk to desk for 6 years and had never once shown it to anyone in this building. The woman in the gray uniform was her mother. Her mother had cleaned an office tower on the other side of the state for 19 years on the night shift because the night shift paid 40 cents more an hour. Gerald Whitmore had never married her. He had not put his name on anything until Vanessa was 18, and there was a tuition bill in front of him, and when he finally did, she took the name gratefully and buried the other one and buried the woman who had given it to her along with it. That was the thing nobody at the long table knew. They all thought she was the chairman's daughter. Not one of them knew she had been the cleaning lady's daughter for 18 years first, and that she had spent every day since terrified that somebody would notice. Because when Vanessa was 9 years old and had nowhere else to be, she used to sit in the lobby of that other tower on Fridays with a coloring book waiting for her mother's shift to end. She remembered the marble. She remembered how cold it was. She remembered a man in a good suit who had come through with 3 other men in good suits, and how he had stopped and looked at her. No, that was the thing, he had not looked at her at all. He had spoken to the man beside him in a voice that was almost bored, as if he were pointing out a scuff on the floor. "Is this an office or a daycare?" She sat in the dark with the photograph in her hands and understood that she had said it, word for word, to a 10-year-old girl in a lobby with a coloring book waiting for her father. She had spent 25 years climbing out of that lobby, and she had never left it. She had only changed places. She was no longer the child on the bench. She was the man in the suit. In the morning, the board would vote and Marcus Kane would file, and the machinery would start moving against a man who fixed lights in hallways so that women walking alone at night would not be afraid, and Vanessa Whitmore would keep her chair. She sat there until 2 in the morning, and somewhere in there she stopped wanting it. The frightening thing about power is not that it makes people cruel. It is that it lifts them so high they no longer have to look down at anything. Vanessa had built her throne out of other people's fear because fear was the only material she had ever been handed. And on the night the throne finally moved beneath her, she discovered something very simple and very quiet. There was nobody standing next to her. It was not that they had left, it was that they had never been there at all. What follows from that is not a rule exactly. It is only something worth carrying. A person who refuses to look straight at her own wound will sooner or later put that same wound into someone else. And healing, when it comes, usually begins the moment she stops pretending she was never hurt. The board convened at 8 o'clock on Thursday morning, 16 hours before the lease on Meridian Tower would expire on its own. Marcus Kane had the complaint printed and bound. He set it down in front of the chief executive, opened it to the last page, and laid a pen across the signature line. It was 31 pages long. It named Raymond Hale 40 times. Vanessa did not pick up the pen. She looked at the men and women around the table, most of whom had known her since she was a resume, and she thought about how many hours of her life she had spent making herself acceptable to them. Then she pushed the document back across the table. "No," she said. Kane began to explain the exposure, and she let him get about 4 words in. "We're not filing this because he's wrong." Her voice was steady, which surprised her. "We're filing it because he's poor, and poor people can't afford to argue for 3 years. That's the entire strategy. That's all it has ever been." She looked at the pen lying there. "And we were going to do it by making a man wonder whether we could take his daughter away from him." The room was very quiet. "I'm not signing it," Vanessa said. "If that means I lose this chair, then take a vote." Gerald Whitmore did not raise his voice either. He never had to. "You've just ended your career," he told her. "No," she said. "I've just started it." She left the pen where it was and walked out. By 8:40, the lobby was full because word travels faster in a building than in any other structure human beings have ever built. 340 people stood on pale marble under 30-foot ceilings, and Vanessa Whitmore came down the stairs, the same stairs, with nothing prepared. She had no statement. She had no communications director beside her. She stood where Raymond Hale had been sitting on Tuesday afternoon, and she looked for the first time at the people who worked in her building. On Tuesday, she said, "I told a man to use the back entrance in front of his 10-year-old daughter. I did it in this lobby, and most of you watched me do it." Nobody moved. "I'm not going to stand here and tell you I did it because I was under pressure or because of the quarter or because of my father. I did it because I have spent 6 years in this company deciding which people are worth looking at, and I got very good at it, and nobody ever stopped me." She found Diane Okafor near the elevators and spoke to her directly. "I made you hand him that paper. That was cowardice, and it was mine, not yours." She found Walter Boyd at the security desk, and it took her a moment. "You've opened that door for me about 200 times, she said. "I have never once asked you your name. It's Walter. I had to look it up last night. I want you to understand that I had to look up the name of a man I see every single morning." And then she said the last part, and her voice went to pieces in the middle of it, and she kept going anyway. "I owe an apology to a man named Raymond Hale. Not because he turns out to own this building, because even if he owned nothing, even if he were exactly what I thought he was, I had no right to do what I did." She looked down at the marble. "My mother cleaned a building like this one. Night shift, 19 years. I have spent most of my adult life pretending she didn't exist, and on Tuesday afternoon I said something to a little girl in a lobby that a man in a suit once said to me in a lobby when I was 9 years old and waiting for my mom to finish work." She stopped because there was nothing left after that. And in the silence somewhere near the security desk, one man began to clap. Walter Boyd clapped alone for about 3 seconds, which is a very long time. Then Diane Okafor joined him. Then Casey Doyle with one hand on the desk to steady herself. And then the lobby of Meridian Tower filled with a sound that had never been made in it before. Raymond Hale had been standing at the back of the crowd for the entire thing. He was in the old Brightline jacket, and he had an 8-foot ladder over one shoulder because the light on the 12th floor still flickered and died, and it had occurred to him at 4 that morning that he had never checked the wiring above the junction box. People stepped aside as he came forward. He set the ladder down against the wall. Then he reached into his jacket and laid a folded document on the step in front of Vanessa Whitmore. It was the 10-year renewal. It was signed. It was dated the previous night. "I signed it at midnight," Raymond said, "before you did any of this. You should know that because otherwise you'll spend the rest of your life wondering if you bought it with a speech." He looked past her at the crowd, at the 340 people who had not slept well either. "I didn't sign it for you. There are people who work in this building who never did anything to anybody, and they don't deserve to find the doors locked on Friday morning because two people who make a lot of money had a bad week." Then he turned to face the two men who had come down the stairs behind her, Gerald Whitmore and Marcus Kane, who was still holding the complaint. "There's a new clause in it," Raymond said. "Section 9. The landlord may terminate this lease immediately without cause and without penalty if the tenant uses the personal history of any worker in this building, their debts, their family, their children, to threaten them." He let that sit for a moment. "My daughter asked me if I was angry at your chief executive. I told her I wasn't, so I have to live like a man who wasn't." He nodded at the papers in Kane's hands. "But you wrote the 4th paragraph, Mr. Kane, not her." Kane said something about the clause being unenforceable. "Then test it," Raymond said. "You have 10 minutes to get your things. Use any door you like, I don't care which one." Gerald Whitmore resigned as chairman by the end of the week. He did it in a 2-sentence statement that mentioned neither his daughter nor the video, and Vanessa read it on her phone in the parking garage and did not cry, which she noticed with some interest. The board did not make her a hero. That was not how any of it worked. They voted a formal censure into her file for the events of Tuesday afternoon, and they kept her in the chair on a 12-month probationary review, and 3 of the directors made it clear they had voted that way, holding their noses. She had told the truth in a public lobby, and it had cost her exactly what telling the truth costs. She signed the censure without reading it twice. Raymond Hale was offered a seat on the board and turned it down before the sentence was finished. "I don't know how to sit in meetings," he told them. "I know how to fix things that are broken." He asked for one thing instead, and he asked for it in writing inside the lease. 2% of the rent every month for 10 years into a fund that would pay medical bills and school costs for the families of the people who worked in the building. Not the executives. The cleaners first, then maintenance, then security, then reception, then everybody else. He wanted it called the Amara Fund. The first check went out 11 days later to Casey Doyle, who had a daughter in March and did not have to choose between the hospital bill and her rent, and who cried at the reception desk in a way that embarrassed her for weeks afterward. On a Tuesday in the spring, Raymond Hale carried an 8-foot ladder to the 12th floor and set it under the dead light for the last time. Nora sat on the carpet below with her backpack waiting for his shift to end the way she did most days. Vanessa Whitmore came around the corner on her way to the elevators, and she stopped. She looked up at the man on the ladder and down at the girl on the floor, and then she did a small, ordinary thing that would not have occurred to her a year earlier. She put both hands on the ladder and held it steady. She did not say anything. Neither did he. Above her, Raymond stripped the corroded wire out of the junction box, found the fault that had been hiding there for 3 weeks, and made it good. He came down and handed her the old bulb, and she took it and stood there holding it like something she had been given. Then the light came on. It was only a hallway on the 12th floor. It had been dark for a long time. Nora clapped and laughed out loud the way children do at things that are not really funny, and the sound went all the way down the corridor. Down in the lobby, 40 stories below, there was a small brass plaque beside the elevator bank with the architect's name on it, Amara Hale. It had been there for 11 years. 3,000 people walked past it every week. Almost nobody had ever stopped long enough to read it. That is the whole of it, really. You can walk past a person 100 times without once seeing them, and it does not feel like cruelty while you are doing it. It just feels like being busy. So here is the only thing worth asking of you today. Somewhere in your life, there is a person you pass every morning, the man who empties the bin, the woman at the desk, the driver who waits while you find your card. Stop tomorrow. Ask their name, then use it. And if this story moved, you pass it on because somebody out there is standing in a lobby right now waiting to be seen.